Okay, welcome to When Opportunity Knocks, Placemakers Answer. I am Ryan Smolar, and I'm excited to talk with you guys this morning about the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 and how to advocate for place-led recovery funds. And I am hearing a little bit of feedback, so Monica, maybe if you could mute, I'm not sure if yours okay. Great. So just so you know who I am and where I'm coming from, I'm not a policy expert or a government financial expert or anything like that, but I have some really real experiences with the recovery that I want to share with you, and hopefully it helps inform what you know and the actions you can take around the recovery to make it more place-led. So, one hat that I wear is I run a downtown business improvement district in Southern California. We have about 700 businesses, restaurants, arts and culture, national historic building stock, and we're also, the poorest city in our county, most park poor, least educational attainment. So we have a lot of opportunity and a lot of challenges that we're working on in our community. And so we had some direct experience with CARES Act funding, which was the previous relief package that I'm going to share with you. And then the second hat I'm wearing is that I work for a nonprofit that does food access in Long Beach, California. And so, from the perspective of a community nonprofit who's trying to help with immediate relief, but also build systems of sustainability that support community, had experience with the RFP side of CARES Act funding and advising a lot of our good actors in the food system, from the farmers market to local chefs, how to apply for, receive CARES Act funding, and then go on to provide services and programs in the community. And then finally, I also lead the PlacemakingUS network. And because of the lessons that we had with CARES Act funding on the ground, the discussions we had with our network members of placemakers all over the US, we decided we needed to get out on the road. And so we're actually about 2 weeks into a 3-month road trip around the United States to visit maybe 50 or 60 cities and talk with placemakers there on the ground about American Rescue Plan Act, and help them figure out how it's going and where to look for money and who to talk to. And so we'll be looking at some lessons from the road that we've traveled so far. So just really quickly to go back to the general on American Rescue Plan Act, it's a pretty cool thing. I'm hearing people call it ARPA, so ARPA, and all in all, it's a $1.9 trillion federal recovery act that was passed earlier this year. And in particular, I've been most focused in on this item called Subtitle M, which is the $350 billion for states, counties, cities, and tribal nations. But in looking at the full bill text, a lot of this bill goes towards shaping how our communities are going to provide services, how our communities are going to look, what our communities are going to be about. There's tons of other components in there that are worth looking at, with specifics to maybe what you're interested in, whether it's technology and broadband development, or if it's more ecological work, infrastructure, recreation. There's lots of different pieces to this. Some highlights it's sharing are there's over 135 billion dollars was allocated to the National Endowments for the Arts, for example, and that will be granted out to arts organizations. There's shuttered venue money. There's money for senior services, for child services, for homeless services, for parks, for libraries. So it's quite expansive, the pots of money that are being made available. And I think it's worth looking at, those specific ones that you're interested in. An easy way to do that is to go look at the bill, just the titles, and click the links to get to the item, or just hit find when you have the bill open and look for the keywords you're interested in, and it'll take you right to it. Something that's interesting that I saw reported was that I think all but 2 Democrats supported this and no Republican supported this in Senate or U.S. Senate or Congress. And it really passed by such a razor thin margin. So it's just kind of interesting that this bill could, or this package might not be here. And this was one of the major points of contention, was this money. So in the US Treasury, they describe what the funds can be used for. And this is some of the language that they use. But you can see that it's going to a couple different things, like decreasing COVID, which luckily we're moving towards now more prevention and pandemic research as well with that. Also replacing lost revenue accounts in local governments, supporting the economic stabilization of households and businesses, meaning direct assistance, loans, rebates to residents and businesses to keep operating. And then this kind of broader, interesting one, address systemic public health and economic challenges that have contributed to the inequitable impact of the pandemic, and those hit hardest by the crisis. So the way that this is flowing out, I'm not going to go through all of it, but essentially the federal government has allocated a large amounts of funds. With regards to the $350 billion, there's a 3-year allocation period. So local governments have up to 3 years to utilize their allocation. The allocation formulas and all that are online, but you can look at it basically as they were by population, by need, and several and other factors. And so each government got an allocation. And then smaller communities like those under 50,000, I think tribal nations as well, have an online portal where they apply for their funds through. But a great way to find your allocation, because the numbers fluctuated quite a bit, is to just really use Google and see what's the latest information, because you could get even in the formulas on the federal site, some of them seem different than the amounts that actually arrived. And then the arrival of the funds is that half of the funds arrived in pretty much the second week of May, and the rest will come, I believe, next year. So let's just look at, for example, how some of this played out politically. So what we started to see first was mayors, even before the guidelines on spending were put out, they put out very ambitious popular plans. It was kind of like high school students running for student government, promising all these things that they didn't really know if they could promise or not. But I think this was an advocacy effort to try and shape the spending buckets that would get created at the state level. And so we saw actually local plans come out long before governors felt like they understood what could be used. And so that was kind of a pre-step. But then governors had to release their adjusted state budget plans and also signal to cities what could be allowed and how things would be filled out, because lots of times cities are using different funding sources or tier cakes of funding. And so they need to know all the couch cushions before they can decide how they want to structure funding things. And the impact of this is quite interesting, is that looking just at California, for example, with the contribution from the state, and also with the fact that tax revenues are actually up and the federal contribution, California passed its largest state budget ever this year. And it is a giant increase, I think, of 20 or 30% more than last year, or even more. And we're tackling large issues like climate change, housing, homelessness, and whole systems of care with the veracity that hasn't been done before. So these are giant war chests that states and cities and counties have right now to approach the problems that have been facing us. And one of the big risks is if you just use that money like sand through the hourglass, or if it's really used to set up and pivot systems towards more sustainable, more equitable approaches towards co-creating our society. Because as we know, for better or worse, all politics are local. And so now that there's this funding at the local level, it gives us great leverage over what's going to happen and how this is going to shape our community. But don't forget, you're one of many different people in your community trying to make something happen. And we want to make sure those with the best intentions, the best knowledge, and the best positionality to help move things forward are the ones who are helping getting engaged in this recovery. Because what you're seeing first at the local level is that elected officials are the first ones to be able to direct where this funding is going. And so you're getting earmarks, or what's historically sometimes called as pork projects, where what those in power want to see funding go to. Usually, like, it could be specific projects or hopefully categorical solutions as well, like setting up buckets of funding for then the best ideas to be applied for. But this is really a first stage of what we've seen with the funding. And then you have departmental vying. So the police need to backfill their budgets. The Parks and Recreation Department needs to back up their budgets. There's projects that the Public Works has had on the shelf for so long, and they finally can get these wastewater projects or this broadband project up off the ground that's already all ready to go. And so that's the next step of where you see the funding going. And so if you don't have a relationship with your electeds where you could be asking them about what's happening and telling them about what's important from a place-led sustainable recovery perspective, then those departmental contacts are key. The person at Parks and Rec Commission that the police officer that the economic development specialist that's friendly to you. Any of those contacts are also going to have a real inroad into how the budgets are being constructed. And then after that, nonprofits will be able to apply for grants, either from community development block grants through, like, which have been supercharged, or through potentially local grants set up by buckets. And we want to make sure that the right charities and nonprofits are getting funded, because what we saw last time is it's so fast that a lot of things got approved, a lot of funding gets approved to people who you may never have even heard of working in your community before. But a lot of businesses are very hip to this funding, and they're going to go after it. And the cities want to get rid of this money, so they're going to approve it as long as it fits a standard. So there's a very low threshold for getting these funds, and we don't want the wrong people to get these funds and misuse them, because it's really our responsibility to make this work. Also, there's going to be a lot of funds to help get people back up on their feet. So keep businesses open, both big businesses and small, and also help distressed residents. And so it's really important. We telling people, don't just reach up to the people who can help make decisions, like mayors and electeds and the people in positions in cities, but please reach out. Like, all of us have privilege, and we have a responsibility to let people who don't have as much as us know about this and help them navigate the system, and also provide their voices so that the services that get created for them are more by them and are more sustainable and something that they can be more a part of. So I really encourage you guys to talk about this with people who you don't think might not even be interested in this, because all of these systems of care are going to be built for society, and society is very exhausted right now, and really has a lot of people don't have the mental load to be thinking about what's about to happen. And so it's our responsibility to help wake that up. And so I'm going to give you a couple little examples just from my experiences in the last year that I think help really show how this stuff just really works in the real world. So with the downtown hat back on, so I work for a downtown business improvement district. We raise funds by taxing the businesses in our area, and we use that to provide them with services, whether it's clean and safe, marketing, events, and a lot of connecting with the city on issues. And our downtown public spaces are kind of under assault. This is a gentleman showing that they removed all of the benches as a way to remove the homeless people from who were utilizing the benches. And we'd been working in our downtown for years to try and get parklets and more outdoor activation, but couldn't get there. And so during the pandemic, when mayors started allowing restaurants to pop out on the street, and NACTO, the National Association of City Traffic Engineers, basically released plans on how you could effectively close streets in a sort of lighter, quicker, cheaper way, to use placemaker parlance. We started advocating to our city that, hey, other cities are closing down streets and creating both public space and business space for them to exist. And in sharing these models we were seeing with our city and the best practices, coming up with some really simple mock-ups along with the businesses, and sending this into the city, this diagrammatic information, which each of these was a conversation. It took several iterations of visualizing, showing this elsewhere, visualizing what it could be. And then the city really ended up adopting it, and they used our ideas and those from cities that they liked to create an open outdoor plan for businesses to open in the public space. And there were some where it was really obvious how to go about it. And as the bid, we leveraged our position to buy about $8,000 worth of fencing to be able to help the restaurants shut down. And this, we figured that in the future, we could use this fencing for future street closures. So although we lent the equipment to the restaurants, I actually ended up being a positive capital purchase just for ourselves as well. And so businesses then were able to reopen. It was really awesome because the immigrant businesses could open, bigger businesses could open. There wasn't really that divide that a lot of people uh, talked about, where this was only for privileged businesses. We did see privilege where if you were in a business improvement district or on a slower street, this was much easier to do. And so that was where I think that there was a huge equity divide. But we saw that our immigrant businesses and our family businesses were more prepared to take advantage of this new opportunity. And we heard statistics as much as, at that time, businesses were down to 2 to 5% of their normal business. And when they were able to open these outdoor patios, business shot up to almost 75% of their previous take. And that was still during the pandemic. So with just a small investment of $8,000, looking at a few cities and best practices, we were able to put this plan together and start helping lots of businesses get patios. But what about these businesses that were on streets that it didn't make sense to pop out? There was nowhere to go. Well, we helped them with some technical assistance just in Photoshop, visualizing what they could do. And it was amazing to us because the very next day, this woman-owned business was able to get all of her permits in order and open up for happy hour the very next day. And this setup continued to evolve over time. So we saw government permitting things really fastly, which was phenomenal. And we were doing things in a scale where it was really comfortable and we could test things. And we quickly found that, these ideas were very adaptable. So that same design we'd done a block over really applied right here as well at this Mexican restaurant. So we were really excited to see this ability to create these light, quick, cheap solutions. And so what ended up happening is, because we had the opportunity by the city to test this idea, pop out these patios, because they were so successful at stabilizing the businesses, that the city, which was running out of time to spend CARES Act money, which was the first recovery fund package, went ahead and spent $750,000, which is a huge investment for our downtown, the biggest single investment. I've been there 7 years that we've ever received, and built out 24 restaurants patios to health code, to fire code, etc. And so now these are more permanent. All the issues have been thought out, like when they have to be moved for utility work or what have you. So this was a huge, huge win for us. And then the city went ahead after this and then put another $500,000 so that other corridors outside of the downtown could also get this service. So this was a huge win for local investment, kept our independent small businesses in business. It kept our cultural fabric. We were able to program these during the pandemic. So instead of having events, we were able to have sort of dispersed entertainment on the patios and utilize them as public space. So this is an example that I really think you could look to say, how can CARES Act funds help restore my Main Street, help stabilize my Main Street businesses, help my community groups reassert public space and events and things like that. These are great examples. Or create space, better yet, that can then be programmable and sustainable on its own way. Another example, switching hats to my food equity work in Long Beach. And so when you go back to when the funds get to the point where the city has set up buckets for proposals, then they're going to start issuing requests for proposals at the department level. So at this point, you need to be getting set up to have your DUNS number, to have the organizations that are going to be receiving the money, to know what programs you're wanting to dust off the shelf, to be testing things like how we tested the patios. This is a great time to be scaling things to what your program is going to look like, because you're going to be needing to apply in 3 to 6 months. And look at this release date and due date. So this grant for which, us in food health, working in food in Long Beach, have been waiting for something like this grant forever. It came out December 23rd. So that's the day before Christmas Eve, and it was due March 11th. So about 2 weeks, or I'm sorry, it was due January 11th. So 2 weeks later, and the money had to be spent, I believe, by March. So this is a incredible predicament that many food businesses that wanted to apply for this, they either didn't know about it, or didn't know how to fill it out, or or the timeline was just too short. And this funds are here so that basically corner markets, liquor stores, which is where in a lot of underserved communities, this is the only place to access food, and it's Cheetos and Takis and all this type of stuff. This is a program to give those people, the operators, financing so they can stock and market more healthy fruits and vegetables. And this came out of the CARES Act. They made $200,000 available for healthy markets to apply for refrigeration equipment, et cetera, et cetera. So only a few people were able to apply, mostly because they had somebody coming in directly to their business as part of an equity project, working with them to fill the paperwork out. But usually there's a big disconnect between this program and the business operator, because the business operator's business is revenue is not coming from healthy food, and you're asking them to fundamentally change their business model with with some support, but not necessarily enough. And so we were very excited because with this RFP, we had become familiar with the Filipino market in an area that we serve, that where they already have 40 fresh fruits and vegetables in stock, including ethnic things like bamboo shoots and bitter melon. I mean, it's a really phenomenal market in an area that has few. And but their problem is some of their equipment is broken, and so their refrigerators being broken, they're inefficient, it's costing a lot of electricity, it's not attractive, so it doesn't sell. So they were a great they were a great potential recipient of these funds, but they'd missed the deadline. And so we were able to go to the health department, who issued this after the fact, after the close of the deadline, and still connect them and get them together and get them an agreement where they're going to receive, if they do what they're asked, they'll receive funds from the health department, even though they didn't apply to the RFP. And the reason that I think these departments are able to do this is because this funding, if it doesn't get utilized, it goes back or it disappears. So they really want to see this funding get executed. You saw with the CARES Act funding in Santa Ana with the patios, that was a Hail Mary pass that the city made at the last minute to save those funds. And then here, even after an RFP was issued, they were still able to assist in this matter. So this is very, very good stuff. And so we've talked a little bit about equity, but as Placemaking US, um, I wanted to take the lessons that I had learned personally from my bid and from working with the food justice, and I really want to see many more people have this knowledge and the ability to talk about this recovery and co-create this recovery. You know, it's great. I love to take things back to core placemaker lore and Jane Jacobs. You know, great quote from Jane Jacobs, who's kind of our patron saint, is that the city that has something for everybody was created by everybody. And so when it's just being created by the electeds and the nonprofit service providers and departmental vying, yes, all those people know their communities, they're in touch with their communities, they're doing good work, but we still need the community to rise up and do for itself and to protect each other. And that's what the real resilience in society is. And so we wanted to break that open as wide as possible because we don't want to see recovery look like this, where you're actually imbuing people to push other people out of their properties and restore them for other people, and really just a not community serving community. And so we've been going on a road trip since the end of May. It's a 3-month road trip, and we're visiting over 50 cities where we're talking with placemakers about ARPA funds, about how their approach to placemaking, what's necessary, and what's going on. And so I'm going to go ahead and just show you another screen here. Okay, this is it. So this is a little bit of some summary from some of the lessons we've learned along the road. As we're going along, we're giving placemakers this great place ribbon that celebrates what they're doing. And so this is Epicenter in Green River, Utah, was one of our first stops. And they're they're a rural placemaking studio based out of the Auburn Rural Placemaking Design Center philosophy. And a project that they're working on is their town needs more population. And so they are building a housing project, which they've designed. They have architects on staff. But unfortunately, what we're hearing a lot of is that people who have projects, development projects, the costs of lumber and supplies has risen quite a bit. And it's important to note too, there is supply chain money, improvement money in the ARPA funds as well. So hopefully some of those issues will get resolved and people can speak to how critical that supply chain is for a lot of ARPA's higher goals of building more housing. But their goal to build housing in their project was delayed somewhat because of the increased costs in those things. So that's something that they can apply to ARPA for from the housing side, or potentially asking that the supply chain stuff be utilized as well. I'd love to highlight in Colorado we visited, and you know, Colorado as well as many places told us that they felt that the pandemic made their community stronger. They worked more closer together. A lot of people utilized this economic sort of pause to actually reposition things and get ready for things. So they felt very much like things were completely booming there. And I really want to highlight, though, Denver's approach to ARPA, because their approach seems, as far as we've seen, one of the most interesting. They took the funds and they got around $300 million. And then they're combining it with a bond measure for another 400 million, so that they have a $700 million war chest to tackle inequity and build 40,000 jobs by 2022. So their framework and way of showing how they're doing the different buckets. Oops, Pia, I think if you could mute, we can hear you. Me on you. Their different buckets, and then also their intent and way of describing it. They have, as many of your cities might have, a branded name for the recovery. So theirs is Rise Denver, which has its own website. It had town halls, it had surveys. So you definitely want to look to see if your city has something like this. Ours in Santa Ana is called Revive. And so there were surveys, and obviously it will go to council a few times as they adjust the local budget. And that's where a lot of people went in to speak or sent letters in as well. But I think Denver is doing an amazing job, and one of the best. And I visited St. Louis, and it seemed like their plan was more about clearing land. The city of St. Louis is smaller now than it was in 1860. One of the neighborhoods I visited has shrunk from 14,000 residents to 2,000 residents. And so they have abandoned buildings, vacant lots. They told me they even have a mow to own program in St. Louis, where if you mow a vacant lot for a period of time, you eventually own it. And so the recovery there will be very much focused on development and also bringing in jobs and entrepreneurship with people of color communities. They have a very robust jobs plan that they already had set for 2030. And so it seems like they're going to use funds to fund that effort. And so that's what a lot of cities are doing, is if they have plans on the shelf that were approved by the community in the city, but were not funded, those are really prime targets to get funded. So it's a great time to dust off those plans. There's always the joke that the plan gets written and put on the shelf and never looked at again. And that's usually because there's no money. So it's a great time to take the plans off the shelf and see if there's things that can be earmarked or funded at this time, because those things are prioritized over new projects or things like that. In Since we have Larissa from Carmel. Carmel is a wealthier community, and so when I spoke to the mayor about recovery funds, uh, he said that they got about $7 million, and they were able to really just put it in reserves and wait and see with it. So I'm sure they're financial geniuses there, so I'm sure they will put that money to work. But it goes to show you that these funds are very varied. Los Angeles got, I think, $1.2 billion, but smaller communities are just getting a few $1 million. And how they utilize it is very, very, very flexible. In Westwood, which is a neighborhood in Cincinnati, this lovely woman, Leslie, she is on they're the neighborhood group. And so they partnered with a few other neighborhood groups, and they have a neighborhood umbrella group called Home Base. And so Home Base advocated to their mayor for $1.5 million for neighborhood revitalization grants, and that was earmarked for them. So that was a really great example of a direct ask from the right stakeholders. It was clear. It was a good, I think, amount to ask for. I think Cincinnati got, I think, 300 million or something like that. So that was achieved through the efforts of Leslie and just a few other placemakers. Um, these two lovely women in Delaware, Ohio, uh, one of them was working with the state Main Street program. And so what she said, and what we heard a lot of in red states with blue cities, is that the red state priorities are not lining up with the city priorities. And so when the funding comes in at the state level, some of the earmark buckets are not lining up. And so she had said that in her talks with the state, they were very much going to just prioritize sewer and wastewater funding. But even in those type of projects, there can be an opportunity for improving our communities, creating recreation space in addition to the infrastructure. So they have to stay engaged and see what they can do with that. So yeah, there's still some more lessons that we've learned, but I think I've shared for quite a long time. So I hope that is interesting.